Hello and welcome to another episode of Team Anywhere. I'm Mitch Simon on the West Coast, and I'm with my co-host, Judy Mathis, on the East Coast. And today we are excited to have Barry Winkless. Barry Winkless is the Strategy and Innovation Director and Future of Work Lead at the CPL Future of Work Institute. Barry has over 19 years of experience working across multiple sectors in the areas of strategy, service excellence, and innovation. Good afternoon, Barry. How are you?
Hi, guys. Hi, Mitch. Hi, Virginia. Lovely to see you both.
Hi, Barry.
So great. So yeah, Barry, I think is like eight hours ahead of us today.
I'm actually, I'm kind of subtly trying to finish my day as quickly as possible, Mitch, and you're preventing me from doing that.
I'm sorry. Okay, and the podcast is over. So we just want to open up. It's been a year since the pandemic. What has the last year looked like for you, and what are you excited about for the future?
Oh, great question. I suppose I'll speak about it professionally and personally because I think I think everybody's experienced it kind of that way, haven't they? Really, at work. So profession's been really interesting for us. So Future Work Institute is part of CPL, so we're quite a large European talent services business, and we've seen all sorts of things happening in the talent space. Overall, our business has been very strong throughout COVID. So we're quite proud of the team in terms of being able to weather the storm so far. I think from a personal perspective, I think I've had the similar challenges to everybody else, adapting to a new way of working, kind of trying to lead a team in a very virtual and distributed manner. And really try to learn new behaviors, new approaches to how I lead, at a personal level.
Great. Thank you for that. And I understand you just completed, or your team completed a study. I think is it 9 months that you've worked on this study?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've kind of, just to give you a little bit of context, the Future of Work Institute, we're a multidisciplinary team. And our role really is to question, explore, and design future work solutions. So we're very much at the leading edge, sometimes the bleeding edge of the future of work.
Yeah.
And in that research, in that role, I should say, Mitch, we conduct thought leadership work, and then we also create research. And we work with a number of organizations from a consultancy perspective. And that particular paper really came out of a recognition from us, at least, that there was no real kind of clear definition of what the future of work is. There's no real models out there that kind of leaders could use to map where they are around work and where they wanted to go in terms of the future work. And really, that's what this paper is all about. So it's a culmination of research, of working groups with organizations, of surveys, and of our own kind of thought leadership in this space. So it's been a long time coming. I like to say to the guys, it's quite a seminal paper, because we've tried to create the definitions that we hope leaders can use now and into the next kind of 50 years. So hopefully we've achieved that with the paper.
Great. And the first thing that anyone recognizes, and the paper is available free online, which is really amazing. It's a really great paper. The first thing that you notice about the paper is, first of all, it's absolutely beautiful, right? And tell us, you were sharing with us right before the podcast that you've used a theme park theme to present your concepts, and so I'm really interested. Why did you choose the theme park?
Yeah, look, it's number one. My kind of background is very much in this area called experience design, and really, what is that? It's around how do we actually create things that are memorable or transformational in some way, or at least that's my definition. And, when you really think about it, you guys had this great person called Walt Disney back in the 1920s and 30s, and he was actually the guy who really invented the theme park in 1955 with the opening of Disneyland. And really, it was what I would call the first properly experiential destination where people were fully immersed, were excited, created memories within that context. And really, for me, the reason we use that theme park analogy is because that's what we're trying to create now in our workplaces, right? We're trying to create memorable, transformative experiences for our employees in organizations, and hence the use of the theme park motif in the report, and actually also right at the core of some of the principles that we use ourselves in thinking about this thing called the employee experience. So it's very much around that level of attention to detail, the same attention to detail that we put into all of our beautiful products and services that we also put into the design of beautiful and memorable experiences for, really what are the driving force behind any business to people.
So I guess listening to you and thinking about where we are with the future of work, one would suspect that it seems like a lot of us are not going back to work 5 days a week. And then you're bringing out a theme park theme, and someone say, "Well, that doesn't make sense." I live in California, and I'm just a few miles away from a theme park, Disneyland, and it's shut down. Like nobody's going. So I'm just wondering, how do you use the theme park experience theme when a lot of people won't be in work 5 days a week like they used to?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think first and foremost, when we talk about the idea of a theme park, we think about it as a concept that exists both physically and virtually. Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you think about this as a multiverse, multimedia, theme park that exists both virtually and physically, that's the first thing. Okay, I think that's a really important thing to get across. I think the second thing is one of the things that we're seeing in our work that we're doing ourselves is it's not that we're necessarily moving away from offices. Some organizations are definitely going down that route, where they're going to have a zero office organizations, and we are starting to see an increase in those types of businesses. We're seeing more of businesses being a hybrid type business where they might be moving towards, 1 or 2 days in the office, versus, your kind of 5 days in the office. And then even organizations moving towards 4 days a week and all this kind of good stuff. I think what's really happening when it comes to physical place is because of that change, there's a fundamental rethink needed and happening actually in terms of the role of physical spaces. And I think that's a really important point to make, right? In the sense that, if we don't all have to go to this kind of physical place anymore, what is the role of that physical place, right? What is it about? Is it now going to be a wellness center for our employees? Is it going to be a collaboration center? Is it going to be something more than what it has been for the last period of time? Because if you really think about it, if we're going to come together less frequently in a physical way, it changes the nature of what that physical place needs to achieve, right? It places a greater emphasis on the importance of those types of physical meetings. It nearly creates those physical meetings as almost being an event. Hence the theme park kind of analogy, because now we're talking about bringing people together less often, and then trying to make sure that those experiences, when we do bring people together, kind of bind them to our organization or brand or essence and create really experiences that they can kind of sustain them in that virtual world when they kind of move away from the physical space. So, like, as far as I can see, Mitch, through the kind of the COVID piece, what it's really done is it's made people stand back and ask questions around the world of work that haven't been asked in a long time. And some of these changes were happening before COVID, and COVID has accelerated some of those changes as well. So I think there's all of this kind of stuff going on. We're fundamentally of the belief that, the principles that we talk about in terms of story, in terms of narrative, in terms of theme, in terms of good design, are equally relevant across physical and virtual spaces, when it comes to designing the workplace of the future. So hence the theme park concept.
Okay, so I just need to stop for a second. I put Ginny on mute, and now I can't get her off mute. And the reason why I put you on mute, Ginny, is because we were having the background noise that we were having last time, and it was hard to think. So I put it on mute. Now, I might have to bring you back in again, Ginny. But what I'm finding is that if I put you on mute, I can't take you off mute. And there's something wrong with with this program that I can't take someone off mute. So I'm sorry, Ginny.
Wait, I'm off. I'm on now.
There we go. Oh, it worked. Okay, great. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're just going to edit that out, and then you have a question, right, Jenny?
Yes, I do.
All right,
I wanted
All right. So
I wanted to emphasize Oh.
Okay, so let's just take a pause, and then Ginny, you go.
That is a great point, Barry. I'd love to emphasize. It's sort of turning the pyramid upside down. Now think about when we do get together, that's an event. Usually it was we went to work every day, and that was the norm. Now that's not the norm. Getting together now is the event. And now then, that gives you the opportunity to think, well, how are we going to make this event and use some kind of theme park? And also, and maybe you can give us some examples of how to even do that virtually. I mean, I think of Disney now, and at least 50% is virtual. You go in and you enter this incredible digital space with movement and so forth, but you're not moving out of your seat. So, lots of that's why your future work.
Right? Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. Like, I think, when we talk about these concepts, first of all, we're definitely moving into this mixed hybrid world in terms of physical and virtual mixing up in different ways, right? So, okay, we might have a physical meeting, but we can use technology in really interesting ways to add to the impact of that meeting, right? Equally, in a virtual space, we're seeing lots of really interesting things out there. We're seeing people starting to play around with platforms like Zoom and try to create 3D environments for people to kind of immerse themselves in that. So what we're seeing on one hand is this massive, increase in sophistication around collaboration tools, virtual tools, and everything really that you could possibly ask for. And on the other hand, then we're thinking about, okay, it is an event where people come together. So let's really focus our minds on designing that event to make it as successful and as memorable as it can be. So there's all sorts of really interesting things kind of happening, because of this kind of future work. And some of it will sound mad, so when I say things like, how do you apply, the principles of theatre, to designing a meeting, people automatically say, Barry's mad, he's talking absolute crap. But actually, there are people that have learned how to create emotional impact in audiences, right? So why not use, some of those learnings? If we think about, I come from a strategic background, as Mitch mentioned at the start. Why should I tell people about a strategy when I can immerse them in a story of a strategy? When I can immerse them in the excitement of the strategy? What's more impactful? Right, definitely the immersing of the strategy. Right, if we're coming together less, Virginia, as people, then we've a greater emphasis on those meetings to tie people into our brand, into our essence, into our purpose, into our direction. So it's really interesting that this has kind of really put new questions on the table. It's put old questions on the table in new ways. There's so much technology and solutions out there from all of these different spaces. How do you bring that into the workplace in the right way that adds to our ability to collaborate? All of these big questions are out there now. And that's the one thing that I'm really excited. Actually, on one hand, the whole COVID crisis is a horrible thing, and it has, dealt us a major blow, both I think emotionally and physically across the globe. But equally, it's enabling us to stand back and say, okay, where to now? Okay, let's think about things in a different way. And interestingly enough, Mitch, in the work that we've done on the study, what I was really interested in was one of the feedback was from people was very much around, okay, let's now, they saw COVID as an opportunity to change, right? And I think that's a really important point to make. It's like, okay, COVID is this horrible crisis that we're living through. But as with all crises, it's enabling us to think about a real platform for change. And I think that's the opportunity for me when I speak to leaders around the future of work, because future work is not just about, whether you work physically or virtually. It's also about the changing workforce, how we manage that workforce, how we motivate that workforce. And it's also about the tools and the methods and the technologies that we use to deliver the work. That is a major thing that we need to think about as leaders to create a new competitive advantage. So that's how big we think this future of work thing is. So it's more than where you work, and it's more than the number of days that you work. It's all of those things together. And that's why in the paper, we talk a lot about the 3W model, workplace, workforce, and work task, and how they interact together to create a competitive advantage.
So, Barry, I love this. When Ginny and I got together before the podcast even started, we were really we knew that this was coming. We didn't know how to really explain it. And so you've really kind of captured, I think, some of our initial conversations. And now what I'm thinking about is, before COVID, it was hard enough to plan a meeting where you'd actually have an agenda. People would show up on time and you would take notes. So now you're saying, okay, Mitch and Jenny, here's the deal. You need to have a theatrical, experiential plan for your meeting. I think a lot of managers would just kind of throw their hands up in the air and go, are you kidding me? And what I'd love to know is, what do you think will be the future, and how people are going to figure this out in how to create an experiential experience, right? Because I didn't go to theater school. I'm thinking, I didn't major in cultural anthropology, which I'm thinking is like behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
I've done some stage work, but most leaders will not have done that. What do you think will help us get there and be competitive to understand these new ways of viewing a meeting and actually the practicalities of what will happen first and next?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing, look, you guys, and look, one of the reasons I'm speaking in this podcast is because, you guys, are kind of part of this change, right? You're kind of starting to see, and you have questions in your head about all this kind of stuff. And really part of my role is to try and answer some of these questions, at a broader level. So, like, if you really think about it anyway, right, people throw out this thing around leaders need to become better storytellers. I'm sure you've read umpteen articles around that. And let's be honest, most of it's absolute pump. It's a real throwaway statement. You need to be better storytellers. Most people that I know don't really even understand the structure of a story, or even how to tell an interesting story, whatever, about anything else. And as a result, it's very hard for those leaders to really connect with people, right? So I always say it's a big difference between, there's my 2-page strategy and telling the story of a strategy. Two totally different things. So the first thing is we need to embrace storytelling and what I would call immersive storytelling. So storytelling from all the way from a simple story all the way to what I would call big marquee experiences that are, that make sense for that particular time. So I think, Mitch, I'm not saying all meetings should be experiential, but the really important ones should be, because we're going to have, large groups of our leaders together, less frequently. So let's kind of make sure we put time into that, right? Into those experiences. I think that's really, really important. So I think the first thing is that leaders actually finally embrace this superpower called storytelling, and stop talking crap about it, and actually, put the effort in to learn this and see it as a core competency. Because, I think if you're to say to a leader, you know what, guys, see storytelling, it's as important as coordination, right? In terms of your management toolkit. So just make sure you learn, immerse, and put the effort in, like you've done with your other skill sets, to learn that. I think the second thing for me is what I would call the need for HR and people teams to become much more multidisciplinary in terms of their makeup as a team. So you're absolutely right, Mitch. The HR team of the future needs to include anthropologists, experienced designers, cultural kind of programmers, and everything in between, in order to be the thing that HR teams have been talking about for the last 20 years, be more strategic, in inverted commas, right? To me, that's what the HR needs to do. It needs to think about itself more as a design center for the employee experience, right? And develop up a team based on those principles. So I think that's the second thing. I think the third thing then for me is what I would call the use of in a kind of an increasingly sophisticated array of technologies, right? So why do you even need to take notes anymore when we've got technologies that can analyze our voice, that can record our voice, that can turn our voice into notes, they can do kind of everything in between. So they're the kind of three things that I think for me would help a business to become a much more technocentric, experiential driven, business, and make that kind of whole thing real. I don't know about you guys, but I've sat in many of a leadership meeting that have been bored to tears, which says to me that they haven't fully embraced storytelling, right, in any shape or form. And it's a lot of things, a lot of the stuff I talk about, actually, when I boil it down, comes into how do you turn direction into something exciting and immersive, because everything else follows after that. If your story isn't exciting, your company's not going to be exciting. If your company's not exciting, people aren't going to join the bloody thing in the first place. So everything kind of stems from that kind of that perspective for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we said before, of course, this is coming from Ireland, where you guys have always been like the historical storytellers, right?
Yeah, well, it's true. So maybe Mitch, we're kind of trying to sell our own
I think
snake
so.
snake oil.
The storytelling is what I love, and it just reminds me of the more emotional commercials during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And what's so amazing is how, just like you said, the combination of talent that went into the visual, the emotional, they were like mini movies. So if you take that and apply it to events in the workplace, talk about engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous.
Like we kind of, it's funny, Virginia, like we talk about things like, and I'm glad you brought up the Super Bowl advertisements, because even as an Irish person, I did watch the Super Bowl, and obviously we can claim a bit of Tom Brady's heritage as well here in Ireland. But anyway, but and it's a really important point. Like we use words like love, desire, memorable when it comes to things like really creative kind of advertisements and creative experiences we've had outside of the workplace. Why can't we use the same language in the workplace? Is that a lack of imagination on our half, or laziness, or a lack of competency? It doesn't really matter. But the fact of the matter is there is an opportunity for us to think about it in that way. Like even a very simple thing, and you guys have probably seen this as well, right? Somebody goes in and they redesign an office and it looks really good, looks really nice, but it's done outside of the context of what I would call the other W's, right? They haven't thought about what is our workforce of the future going to look like. Are we going to have 20% of our staff permanent and 80% freelancers who are going to be all over the world? Are we going to use certain types of collaborative tools, in this space? So what I think the big thing for us to really do in the future work is think about it in an integrated fashion. And I think for me, the biggest mindset that a leader can adopt for the future work is a holistic one. So thinking about joining the dots before they make, a decision on a workplace, or, because for example, right, I could turn around tomorrow and say, hey guys, in 5 years' time, I'm going to have an organization with 0 employees, but I'm going to have 1,000 people working with me, right? Now, we could never have said that 30 years ago, right? Never. Now, the reality is by about 2040, 2045 globally, the predominant employment type will be freelance, right? So we will transition from a place of people like ourselves working for organizations to people like us working with organizations, right? That in itself changes absolutely everything in terms of the power dynamic, in terms of what is a supplier versus an employee, versus what the hell an employee is in the first place is. It changes absolutely everything. Right. So that is the world that we are now living in. We are living in a world where a 15-year-old kid can be really interested in a really, really niche subject. They can develop their passion online. They can link with a network community across the globe. They can monetize their opportunity and then create a business out of nothing. Right. So this is the future of work. This is right at the core of the future of work. Right. In a world where actually, think about this, people will no longer really need to work for companies. They will work with a multitude of companies, right? So that in itself is one massive discussion point, around the future of work. So when we talk about, what is a workplace, just as an example, the workplace of the future is really just a network. It's a network of people connected together by common values, hopefully by a common purpose, for that particular group of people. And I've used the phrase in a recent article of mine that I call the disposable organization, because, where we can bring 20 people together for a project that might last 12 months and then we dispose of it. It's no longer an organization. So this is the kind of world that we're living in now. And so, we need to fundamentally ask those kind of questions. We don't have to stick with what we have. We need to kind of think about what this thing workforce is for our organization. Why do we need all these employees? We can have lots of people working with us. We can have a network of talent, but do we actually need all of this other stuff? So these are the really big questions that, I know I spend lots of time with my team, working on and thinking about with organizations. And that's why I fundamentally believe that the next competitive advantage for organizations is an inward one. It's around looking internally at how they work, not necessarily externally at the market and the propositions, because ultimately it's the people that drive everything anyway. So, for me, it's around reassessing the workplace, the workforce, and how we deliver work tasks, the tools that we use, the technologies that we use. That's the stuff that kind of gets me excited.
And what I expect, so a lot of that is then, if I put myself in a leader's shoes, collecting that talent. I need to tell a story. I'm not good at that. Who can help me? I need to have it visually pleasing.
Yep.
Who is that? These are different skill sets that I might have done once a year for some big gala. But now to make that part of who and what I am, I just know coaching a CEO on start telling stories. That took me 3 months for him to get comfortable around telling stories. So there's some skill sets there.
What I see is the context that you're putting on this, Barry. I'm just like flabbergasted what you're saying, because if we go to the my background before was the entertainment industry, and in the entertainment industry, you got a bunch of people together. They came to you because you were a great director or a great producer, and then the movie shut down, and then you as a skilled employee of the entertainment industry would then say, okay, my next gig, I'm going to go for, as it actually turns out, I'm going to go for the best storyteller, Barry, right? Because I know that guy can tell a great story, and so I'm going to work for him, and he's going to put it on the screen or the small screen. What I'm hearing you say is just like today's Gen Y, Gen Z, who are going to determine about, okay, I'm going to watch this Netflix special over here and this 30-second clip over there. They're going to do the same thing with work.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because Mitch, you might have it's a great analogy, because you might have a Netflix career. You might have 8 different organizations that you're working with at the same time, and you're dipping in and out of, you might have 15 days work with organization A, 50 days work with organization B, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where the kind of micro niche thing becomes really interesting for me, right? So let's take this world that we live in where we can connect up really with kind of ever more specific skill sets, right? So really think about that. So let's say I really want the best possible, animator, or the best possible person who's expert in one particular type of SEO, of search engine optimization. I can now interact with that person directly. I can agree a price of daily rates. I can work with that person on that very, very specific thing. Now, for that person, the work that I'm doing with that person might only be 4 days work, right? But that person might have 50 of those projects, right? So that person has now monetized a micro niche skill, but at a global level. Now that up until recently, that would have been impossible, because we didn't have the hyper connectivity that we have today. And also we didn't necessarily have what I would call the democratized tools that we have today. So if you think about it, Mitch, you're from the entertainment industry, right? I can go online, I can go onto Unity platform. I can design more or less pretty simply a virtual reality experience with no prior experience, really. I can go online, I can go on YouTube, I can learn some tutorials, and more or less I can build something pretty professional, right? Like, really think about that. That is me using almost free, democratized tools to create an immersive experience that, if I wanted to, I can sell that to kind of other people. And it's not just for that, it's for lots of different things, lots of different skills I can now learn online, I can monetize, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really, really interesting place that we're in. And Virginia, you're bang on what you said, because, we're moving beyond this thing called marketing, right? We're moving beyond it. We're moving into meaning and purpose. We're moving into people wanting to work with organizations that mean more than the bullshit, that's paddled around. Excuse my language. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use that phrase on this podcast, but anyway, I'll blame my Irish background and my Irish roots for that. But that is the reality, and you're right, Virginia, in that those organisations that have a fully defined, what I call tail of direction, which is a purpose plus a story. They're the ones ultimately that are going to really attract people, to those organizations, right? There's reasons that certain people work with the really cool companies out there. It's more than just what it says on the tin. It's much deeper. That's why people are attracted to those types of businesses, right? So there's really interesting things happening, and that we've got this massive wave of people that really believe that their path in life is to work for themselves and work with companies as opposed to for them. Now, you think about the challenge that poses for large organizations trying to develop talent pipelines at a global level, to sustain their business. There's a really interesting kind of things going on there, I always like to ask a question of a leader, you have an option, right? Here's the question. The question is, right, you can have a mediocre person, as an employee, right? Or you can have 20% of the best person's time, but they don't work for you, they work with you. What would you pick? Really think about that question. I know what I'd go for. I'd go for the 20%, of the person that's the best at what they do. So that just opens up all sorts of interesting kind of conversations for a leader. It opens up all sorts of horizons for that leader in terms of what they can achieve, as a leader in business.
So let me ask you, Barry, again, all right. So I need to become a better storyteller if I'm a leader. I'm running a company. I need to create better experiences. So how then am I? Maybe we're just a little bit ahead of the future that you're creating is a little bit ahead. But I'm just wondering, how would I practically sit down and think about my next gathering, like when we're gonna, God willing, we're gonna be going back to work starting maybe September or January of next year. How would I sit down and design either my all hands getting together or my next video call or Zoom call with my team? What are some places that I can go to piece all this stuff together? Are there books out there yet? Are there people out there who've really figured this out?
You're asking some lovely questions there, Mitch. Yeah, they're great questions. Look, I go to what I call the sources of storytelling. I'll tell you a story now myself, okay?
All right.
About kind of 15, 16 years ago, I was thrown into this project. I was working with a very difficult management team. You know the type, know everything, totally infallible. They think they're the next kind of Steve Jobs type situation. And I needed a mechanism to really get their buy-in and to change the way they're thinking about things. So the only thing I could turn to was this thing called storytelling. 16 years ago, I had no clue about what it was. So I immersed myself in storytelling. And my key moment was I was speaking to my mother. My mother was actually involved. She's a musical producer. And she said, have you heard about this thing called a show Bible? I was a show Bible? What the hell is a show Bible? She said, well, a show Bible is a thing that TV executives use to pitch TV series, like the idea behind it. They might use some imagery to highlight, what it is, right? And, what it's going to be about, so you can imagine, I'm trying to think of some really good US shows, but like Stranger Things or, CSI, this is our show Bible. This is what it's going to be about. And these are going to be the main characters. And this is going to be the atmosphere of it. And here's some images to get across, what that, and I was going, oh, that's really interesting. And there's a really important thing along with that, which is a thing called a log line. And the log line is the one line that very quickly gets across the concept of a TV series, right? So I always like to ask a kind of a leader, start with your log line. What's your log line? What's the log line of your business? Forget about all the brand stuff. What's that core log line that you would write about your business? What's that one line? The second thing I asked them then to do is, if you're going to create a show Bible for your business, what would it be? What pictures would you put in that show Bible to represent the culture you're trying to create? what atmosphere would you describe, right? What key characters would you kind of develop up? That's where I'd start, Mitch. I would start what I would call at the sources of storytelling. Then if I was in a kind of a more interesting kind of mode, I would go back to my, as I said, my Walt Disney roots and kind of look at all the things he learned about storytelling and, how to tell stories in 3 dimensions. I'd also look at things like, how, great storytellers kind of develop stories around a 3-act, kind of 3-act approach. I'd learn from all of those different sources and I would absorb but I would start with my log line and I'd start with my show Bible of my business. And actually there's a little segue in the report where I talk about the show Bible, in that. And that was the moment for me where I said, okay, storytelling. Storytelling is the key to creating emotional impact, not just at a personal level or at an entertainment level, but at a core business level to create change. I think storytelling for me, particularly in the business context, it's a gel, it's a connector. It's a light. It illuminates a direction that hasn't been fully formed yet. It's a motivator. It's all of those things, and everything in between. And I actually think the key thing for me, for leaders, is to make sure that leader creates other storytellers in their business, by practicing what they preach. We buy stories, guys. We don't buy really anything, except stories. Every product we buy is a story. Every service we ever bought of a story, or somebody has told us a story about it. And organizations are exactly the same. An organization needs to recognize that it in itself is almost like a product that's been sold to potential future employees. You have to recognize that. That is the reality. And we need to tell the stories that get across the essence of what we are in an authentic way. I think, Virginia, just come back to your point, that's not making up, but it's right at the core of the soul of the business.
All right. What playing a bit of devil's advocate here. I love this. I'm bought into it. I can see some new skill sets I want to learn myself and or make sure I make this group full-time or part-time or 20%. How does this tie to the bottom line?
How does this tie to the bottom line? Okay, so let me take you on a journey. Let me take you on a journey of success. What if I was to say to you, we're gonna be a business with no offices. We're going to be a network. Straight away, we've taken probably 5 to 7% capex off the bottom line, right? Now you tell me what kind of process efficiency program is going to kind of give you that right? Then let's talk about employee engagement. And let's talk about that for every 1% we improve employee engagement and experience, we're probably going to get 10% performance increase. Bam. That's a 10% increase in your performance straight away. Then we go into the kind of tools that we're using and the appropriate use of robotic process automation, the appropriate use of collaborative technologies. Bam, you've got another 5 to 10% in terms of your performance increase there. So straight away, I've kind of improved your bottom line by 25%, just by thinking about the future of work as a competitive advantage, just about thinking about creating an experiential workplace that actually enhances an individual's and group's performance. So I don't know where else you're going to get those kind of numbers outside of hyper growth unicorn businesses or major acquisitions that may or may not work. Like, let's be honest, from that perspective. And that's why I always come back to this whole idea of, let's move beyond talking about the future of work as, flexible working, and let's think about future work as a integrated design opportunity for competitive advantage.
Barry,
so hopefully that answers your question, Virginia. Some of those numbers are a little bit spurious, but trust me, they are based on some of our research. So.
Barry, I was wondering I'm blown away by this new way of thinking in this new world of work.
So I told you, snake oil salesman, Mitch.
I know. Well, again, the study is free online. You can get it for nothing. Yes. When we don't imagine that employees are coming back 5 days a week, and again, you're saying I might have a company where I might not have any employees, But as we transition, I think for many companies, they do have employees that will be coming back. Take me through, if you can, what might it look like when, let's say my company, I'm going to have my employees in the office just on Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the events? And this is again what Ginny and I were asking ourselves when we started this podcast. What are some of the events that are going to happen? Again, you're Walt Disney. You're taking us to Tomorrowland, right? And we walk into and we see. I just have to say, my favorite ride at Disneyland when I was a little kid. I grew up right by Disneyland, so this is a great.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so jealous, Mitch. I have to say.
Yeah, so it was the Carousel of Tomorrow, which came from the World Fair
yes, yeah.
in '67 or whatever.
Yeah.
But
which was originally, if correct me if I'm wrong, was premiered at the World's Fair of 1964. Was it? Or 1965?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And you would go, and you would basically, the seats would move around this round auditorium, and then you would see the past, you would see now, and you would see the future. Right. And
it's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. That's the song. Sherman
Brothers. It's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, getting back to the question, Barry. I know it's late Friday over there. So I'm going to come to the office on Wednesday, and I'm going to now, you're going to Barry, going to have us peek into what is it going to look like? What's going on in that workspace when they've all come together? That's different than it was before.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a good question, Mitch, and I think the first question you ask yourself is, when and why do we need to bring these people together, right? So that's really important, because by default, it's going to be much more of a kind of key moments, right? So that's the first thing, just to use your Disney analogy there again, Mitch. It's like key moments with Abraham Lincoln. I think is one of the other things I remember watching. The robotic animatronic.
That's right.
Lincoln. So I think that's the first thing, because we're going to be in a world where those meetings have a much greater premium. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to really focus on the design of that experience. I think, I've listened to some of your podcasts before, guys, and I'm consistently underwhelmed by the quality of meetings, right? I know you guys have kind of touched on that subject before, and this is going to put an even greater premium on that, a greater premium on the design of a meeting. So that's the very first thing. So why do we need to have people together for this meeting? And by default, it's going to have to be for a big reason, right? And that the reason I'm saying that is because that will then dictate the kind of design that we're going to create for that particular meeting. So I'll give you one very specific example and something I was involved in a few years ago. Let's say we're going to bring people together because we want to have a strategic visioning session, right? What might I do differently there? Well, what I might think about is creating a prop that is a newspaper that talks about the company 10 years from now, written by a well-known journalist. And, I'd have two papers. I'd have one that shows what went wrong, and then one that's a kind of a celebratory article around, how successful we were. And I would build an experience based on that. And because for me, what experience does, guys, is it gets behind the thinking mind. It gets into the emotional, real-world conversations that we're all striving to have. So that would be one example, Mitch, right? So we create this alternative newspaper-led future, and point it at our business, and then really create a much more emotionally led conversation. I'll tell you a little bit of a mad one in my previous job. If we want to get people together because we really wanted to get across the message around D&I, diversity and inclusion, I might actually create an experience where we get, don't laugh at this one, but we get our people to meet with different alien races and to try to converse with them in different ways. And through that process, we're actually teaching them the value of diversity. And I should say, guys, that was actually something that we did do. So that's not a make you up thing. So it's to make sure that we're using the appropriate physical meetings for big bang opportunities, right? And I think that's the really kind of important thing for me. I think we've devalued the meeting. We've devalued the concept of meetings, right? 200 years ago, it was very, very hard for people to get together, right? It's very hard for people physically to get together and do something. And when they did, it was a celebration. of some shape or form, right? You might have people that were away for 9 months, on a ship, right? And they come back to harbour and, all of a sudden, so it's that kind of concept. So number one, why have these people together? Number two, purposeful design. And number three, use a kind of story-driven, innovative, exciting approach using props. That's not going to cost you more time or more money, but creates a different type of experience that brings you to somewhere else. And I think that is kind of, for me, is what that kind of thing would look like. And again, that's me just taking those very specific, examples on that. I'm not saying that we all should be doing everything experiential all of the time. Very much comes back to the types of meetings, and what the most appropriate one is.
This is fabulous, and I really love the examples you gave, because that was my next question. So what would that look like? I love the 2 different newspapers. I love the interviewing of the aliens. It actually addresses the issue head on, but it's safe. And that takes incredible creativity. I'm thinking there may be a lot of unemployed writers out there that are going to get have an opportunity.
I keep saying this to people. In that now is the time for the creative industries in business. Now is the time. I speak often to, people in the entertainment space around the opportunity. And actually, we have collaborations with people, in some of these areas, because this is, for me, is the next kind of, the next big opportunity, for these kind of people, because, that sometimes is where, that to me is where the intersection of arts and business really collide. We're still very much looking outward when we talk about using creatives. We still very much think about the next marketing campaign, or the next experiential marketing piece that we're going to do. And you see this stuff, particularly you guys in the States do it really well. But that's all very outward looking, and in the meantime we've got a bunch of employees, and you're going, well, what about me? Am I not kind of equally important in this process? It's only employees that can get you to customers. It's only employees that can build your customer base. So I do think we're into that age of applying this kind of level of creativity, a level of thinking, and combining that with expertise that businesses already have in terms like HR and in terms of policies and structures. It's the magic blend for me of those two things that will really kind of bring us to this thing called the future of work. And that can be in virtual space. I do want to call that out, because you can do a lot of experiential stuff virtually, or that can be in a physical space, or it can be a mix of both. And I think for the next 10 years, I think we're talking about a mix. I think we're talking about a mix of the physical and the virtual. But we really need to rethink about the purpose of meetings, the importance of certain meetings, and the role of the physical space.
Wow. Barry, thank you so much. I just want to sit here and listen for hours, because it's just like we're hitting on the vein. We're like on the vein of some really, really key insights and directions on the future of work. So if we could close up, Barry, if you wanted to share any last words, and we'd love to know if you could tell our listeners, how to find out more about this report, how to find out more about the future of work. If you could fill us in on that.
Yeah, no problem. So if you basically type in CPL Future of Work Institute, that'll bring you to lots of really interesting articles, our papers, some of the mad things I talk about a lot. So you go on to Google there. But I should also say as well, Mitch, if people put my name in there, Barry Winkless, they'll get some of my talks that I've done, and that kind of stuff, all up there, all free, all available. And then, through those links, then people will be able to kind of log on and find the white paper, Future of Work World, which I definitely don't want to kind of do the salesmanship here, Mitch, but I do think that in that paper covers a lot of the concepts that we talked about today in a kind of a structured fashion. And things like the show Bible is in there, things like the 3W model is in there, some of the experiential trends are in there. So I'm very open, guys, for people reading it, get in touch base with me. Barry.winkless at cpl.ie, please do. I really mean that. I'm a huge believer in the network effect. So, please tell your listeners to kind of touch base at any time.
All right, Barry, thank you for your just great generosity. We love your company. We love Alicia having her on the podcast a couple of months ago. I think it's time for you to go have a weekend. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is fabulous.
Thanks, you, all of our listeners. Great. Thank you, Barry. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Team Anywhere. And if you've loved this episode like we have, please share this on your social media. Let people know that this resource is available. Okay, great. We'll see you next time.